I'd like to introduce Bill Tieleman. For those that don't know Bill, he's a communications strategist and campaigner based in British Columbia, currently serves as the director of the BC Coalition for Affordable Dependable Energy, BC-CADE, a multi-stakeholder coalition united to ensure that BC and British Columbians can retain access to energy choices that are both cost affordable and reliable in the transition to cleaner energy systems. He's president of Westar Communications, does a great deal of consulting for many groups, and also served in senior roles in the past, including for the BC Premier's Office and the BC Federation of Labour. Well-known commentator. Welcome, Bill. Please take a seat. Oh, second seat is perfect. Yeah, just over there. There we are. Fantastic. Thanks so much, Bill. Next up, we'll be joined by Mayor Brenda Locke, Mayor of Surrey. She was elected to her first term as Mayor of Surrey on October 15th, 2022. She's lived in Surrey for 39 years, along with her husband, kids, and now grandkids. She enjoys everything that Surrey has to offer, including its parks, sports fields, recreational facilities, arts and culture opportunities, shops, and more. Mayor Locke's advocacy for the people of Surrey comes from strong and far-reaching roots. She's volunteered in many capacities over the decades, including with the Surrey Urban Mission, an organization that works to assist those in need. Welcome, Mayor Locke. And then last but not least, let me introduce Barry Penner. Barry Penner is a legally trained advisor with international experience. He provides practical strategies and legal advice for addressing issues involving various levels of government in British Columbia and beyond. We've been really, really pleased to have Barry chair the Energy Futures Institute in the last couple of years, since 2023. But many of you will know Barry for his nearly 16 years in elected office as an MLA, 1996 to 2012. And Barry was intimately involved in helping shape environmental, energy, and other public policy development in Canada's third largest province. And indeed, Barry was the environment minister who actually brought in the carbon price, North America's first. So that's something he very rightfully can take credit for, and served in a number of other portfolios. Since he became chair of the Energy Futures Institute, working closely with us at ResourceWorks, he's really been leading the charge on asking some of the toughest questions there are about many of the things you heard from Minister Dix about, and indeed forcing answers to those questions. So I'll be joining the panelists just now. Round of applause for Barry. So it would be, is this working? Yeah, there we go. It would be a colossal oversight not to have you guys lead us off with a response to what we heard from the conversation and remarks from Minister Dix. I think I'll start with Bill. Bill, what are your thoughts?
Well, I appreciate Minister Dix warming up the audience for us. That's very nice of him to come in and be the warm-up act. Pardon the pun. Yeah, it was very interesting. I think Minister Dix is trying to do some things within the confines, and I know there's some of the BC Conservative caucus here as well, the confines of a party and a caucus that may not have the same views. I'll put it that way politely, I think. But there's a lot to be done, and we didn't actually talk, the minister didn't really talk about affordability too much, which we'll be doing here. But there are real challenges ahead. We've also seen the elimination of the consumer carbon tax federally and provincially. We've seen BC hydro rates go up. We've seen natural gas rates go down as a result of the carbon tax cut. So, but there are still a lot of issues of affordability left for BC consumers, and we're going to talk about that today.
How about you, Mayor Locke? Do his comments resonate?
Yeah, I would echo some of those statements, but I gotta tell you, in cities, it is very challenging right now, especially in growth cities like Surrey, where you have still large greenfield developments. Just not only the affordability of the product, but getting product to market is almost to our developers is really a challenge. We have a number of areas that we're one of the only places in all of Metro Vancouver that has industrial land and the ability for industrial land growth, and then complicate that with a significant housing growth, and just energy is a big challenge for us. So we're seeing businesses walk, and nobody wants to see that. We're also seeing housing right in city center in Surrey not being able to get the kind of energy we need. So that's a massive, massive challenge. But you know, when I'm saying to developers, you're going to have to give a case of candles with every new house for heat and light, that's a big problem. That's a problem. So it's if they're going to be building another another dam or another site C or D or E, they better get on it. We're short now. Thank you.
Eager for answers on exactly which site that will be and when. But I know someone who's even more eager for answers. Barry, you've been poking holes like Swiss cheese in a lot of the things we've been seeing from the provincial government. Did you find his comments about the urgency to build, to transform, to take on more and more risk, to be credible from your perspective?
I certainly agree with Minister Dix that we need to get on and build. I would differ somewhat with his comment that this is the first time in a long time that BC Hydro's been building in advance of actual demand. Think back to the decision a previous government made to go ahead with the Site C dam. The opposition at that time said it wasn't needed, but the government of the day said, no, we are building for the future and we're building Site C. And that decision was made in 2010, and today it's 2025. So 15 years later, the sixth and final unit of the Site C dam has now come online. Be nice if we had a bit more precipitation to help spin those turbines, but sadly it hasn't been the case for the last few years. But it took 15 years from the decision to go ahead to have it actually be almost complete. There's still some landscaping work, I'm told, to be done and a few roads to be paved. But yeah, to Mayor Locke's comment, if we're going to get on with building another dam, and I think you heard some news here today with the minister emphatically saying no when he was first asked, have we built our last large hydro dam? You heard the minister's first reaction was no. I think that foreshadows an interesting public debate that's coming to a province near you, because as he indicated, it would require a change of legislation in order to dam another river in British Columbia. So that can't be done by executive order or in the shadows. It'll be on the floor of the legislature for debate about whether that's what the province wants to do. But I certainly concur with him on one other point he made, where he said the era of low BC Hydro rate increases is over. I heard him say that early on in his comments. And I think, unfortunately, that is correct. We've got at least $16 billion coming due for the Site C dam construction. Now that it's finished, it has to be amortized into the rate base. Up till now, it hasn't been substantially. So that's going to now start flowing through to the rate base. Eventually, those bills have to get paid. And it's necessary, but it does mean that there's a cost increase coming. But we can control, going forward, how much more our rates will go up based on future decisions about how much more we're going to force BC Hydro to build and for what reason.
I think I definitely want to get into that a little bit more down the line here, because you're right. There's price that has to be paid, whether it's taxpayers or ratepayers. At the end of the day, the price has to be borne in some form. But really, what's precipitating that is the massively increased demand that we have. And there's a number of provincial policy mechanisms aimed at decarbonization. We see a lot of this under Clean BC that are massively driving up the total demand for renewable energy. Some of that is coming from industrial users. A lot of that is, things like electric vehicles and new standards for home construction, whether that's provincial or in some cases even municipal. Mayor Locke, you mentioned in your opening remarks that Surrey's been having some issues with this, that the availability of the supply just isn't there yet. Could you expand a little bit more on that? What's driving that? What you're seeing and hearing from businesses, homeowners, developers, things like that?
Oh, for sure. So in industrial parks like Campbell Heights, so for those of you that know the LMD, you'll know that in Surrey we have a really large industrial park there. We are now in a place where we are really being stymied in terms of developing that park any further, and we have a lot of land there that we would like to put into industrial land, and we're just not getting the kind of energy infrastructure there. So I can tell you about one company called Nanak Foods. It's a large food production company. They just bought to new property in there, 300,000 square feet of a plant, and they can't move in yet. They just can't get the power there. They're just one of many, though, that are in the same place. I know another logging milling facility. We can't open it up in the same area. In city center, we have had condo high-rises that haven't been able to get the power to those housing units. So at the same time that the province is saying to cities like Surrey build, build, build. They're giving us housing challenges and telling us you have to build this many houses. We don't have the ability to do it. And so those are real life challenges that we face every day, and something that cities are working with.
Could I respond to that?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Just to quantify that from a bird's eye view, pull back from what the mayor said there on the ground with delays in getting BC Hydro service. According to a recent FOI request I got back from BC Hydro a few days ago, the total amount of electricity requests in the queue, that's this term that they use, on the waiting list, to be served is more than 7,000 megawatts. 7,000. The Site C dam, which is now almost complete, as I mentioned, at maximum output, which you can't do all the time, but at maximum peak, can do 1,100. And the amount of electricity requests in the BC Hydro queue for service is now over 7,000. I believe rounding up, it was about 7,200 megawatts as of July of this year. So this just corroborates what the mayor is saying. There's real challenges in getting electricity to where it's requested.
And that's just based on existing policy drivers. So that doesn't even account for all the policy that's supposed to hit in the next couple of years. Whew. Bill, what are you hearing and
Well, I'm here on behalf of the Coalition for Affordable, Dependable Energy, which I think is now the largest coalition in BC, which may surprise you, but we have Canadian Federation of Independent Business, the BC Chambers of Commerce, Greater Vancouver and Surrey Boards of Trade, the craft brewers, the building trades unions of BC, among many other restaurants, BC Restaurant Association. And we're all concerned because one of the factors that hasn't been discussed too much, and it is a municipal issue, is that there is an effective ban on renewable natural gas, and in the future potentially hydrogen, through the zero carbon step code. And what's happened is when that was brought in by the province a few years ago, with a deadline of 2030, they also said if municipalities want to jump the queue and get going on it, go right ahead, fill your boots. And several did. Vancouver, Nanaimo, Richmond, New Westminster, Burnaby, all have what's now becoming an effective ban on natural gas in all new construction. So not only do we need more electricity, as Barry and Mayor Locke have said, but we're actually cutting back on one of our most important resources, which is natural gas and renewable natural gas. So as you build new buildings without any possibility of natural gas powering them, both heat and whether you have a natural gas stove and fireplace, which I do as well, it's all going to be reduced. So then that's more demand on electricity, plus EVs, plus AI, plus et cetera. And how crazy it is, like as Barry will probably say, he's been talking about it, I've been talking about it, BC Hydro has imported over $2 billion in electricity from the United States and Alberta over the past 2 years or so. And what's crazier is you can't tell where it's exactly coming from. I filed an FOI, it was rejected. I'm not going to tell you BC Hydro doesn't know where it's from, PowerX knows, and PowerX isn't subject to FOI. But we do know that a lot of it's coming from the United States, and we know that we're shipping natural gas from BC down to the United States where they're burning it in power plants and shipping it back up as electricity that we're importing while we say we're green. So there's a real contradiction in terms here of what we're doing. And at the Coalition, we believe that we're going to have a transition in energy. We're not climate change deniers, but we have to do it at a pace which will not destroy economy and jobs. We have to do it at the right timing, and it has to take place without jeopardizing our economy.
I think I'd like to dive into what sorts of affordability impacts are coming down the pipe, so to speak, as a result of these kinds of policies. Do you guys have anything to share on this? Like, whether it's anecdotal or, statistical information. You mentioned $2 billion being imported annually. It sounds like that number's increasing year over year. So trying to get a sense of what that means for ratepayers, what that means for homeowners, developers.
I'll just jump on a slight correction. Bill didn't say over 1 year, but over 2 years, yes, BC Hydro annual reports indicate total imports in the last 2 years were between 25% of all of our domestic needs came from outside the province. So one in 4 electrons 2 years ago came from outside the province to keep these lights on, and last year it was 15%. So that was an improvement, but that represents the Site C dam starting to come online. But still a deficit of 15% in terms of our total electricity needs on a net basis were imported. And that's 3 years running now that we have been dependent on electricity imports. I have some people quibble and say, well, don't we still sell? Yeah, there are times when we do, but the word net means we're importing more than we're selling. And if you look at BC Hydro's annual report that just came out on the Labor Day long weekend when most of us were distracted, page 24 and 25 acknowledge the imports were for domestic load requirements and trading. But the primary is domestic load requirements, and the last time I looked up the word requirement, it doesn't mean optional. It means you need it, and that's been the trend the last couple of years. So the idea, as Bill's referring to, that we're going to reduce or eliminate the option of using natural gas for home heating does really put an extra strain on the electrical system at peak periods. A study that came out in July from an institute based at University of Victoria, just up the road from here, found that if the BC government sticks with that policy, we're looking at an extra load just in the Lower Mainland of 1,400 megawatts, just for the Lower Mainland at peak. And BC Hydro can't just build for the average need for the year. They have to build for peak. It's not good enough to tell someone, well, you survived most of the year. Too bad that your grandmother passed away in a cold spell on that 1 or 2 days of the year when we had extreme weather. So there's an opportunity here for BC Hydro to forego huge expenditures just to hit the peak for a couple of days if we allow dual fuel heat systems. Still a dramatic reduction in overall GHGs, because most of the year you can use your heat pump when the weather is more benign, but on those really savage cold days that we do get here still, and we had a close call in January 2024 throughout the Northwest, we can shave that demand on the electrical system by using the existing built natural gas infrastructure. And if you've been here this morning, you've heard how BC has a huge supply of domestically produced natural gas, generating jobs and tax revenue here. So if we're trying to think of how to reduce those future rate increases that Premier Dix alluded to were coming here for electricity rates in BC, there is a way we can help bend that curve and minimize future impacts.
So in other words, if we don't have to build for the highest use case scenario with peak, as you said earlier with your example with Site C and the sort of the flow over on additional cost only now coming to ratepayers pretty soon, we won't actually have to take as much of an economic hit. Ratepayers won't have to pay as much if we go for the scenario that doesn't require us to overbuild to such an excessive amount. Okay, that's very helpful. Mayor Locke, any thoughts on the affordability piece and what you're seeing and hearing?
Yeah, I just wanted to support what Bill was saying in terms of affordability. Step codes can't be understated. Step codes, every time they go up, they are a huge cost to a door, to whatever that door is. And I know when I talk to the developers, and if there's any developers in here, please don't correct me, but I think it's something like $20,000 a door just for the last step code increase. So what we're talking about housing affordability, and we all know where we are right now, especially in the Lower Mainland. Housing costs are just going way beyond where people can afford, and so it has a dramatic increase in the cost of housing. So it's important that we we can have these great goals, but I can tell you Surrey is not and never will be an early adopter of any of these things. People deserve choice. People deserve to have the right to say they want to burn in their wood fireplace without having the Metro Vancouver police come and knock on your door, or whatever the situation is. People want and deserve to have that choice, and they want it, and so step code is a real massive challenge.
We'll be showing some slides shortly, but before we get into that, Bill, anything to add on the affordability piece?
Yeah, well, you mentioned, Mayor Locke mentioned fireplaces. Anyone here have a wood-burning fireplace or stove? Got a few people there. Well, in Metro Vancouver, if you didn't register it by September 15th, you're subject to fines. There are 100,000 estimated wood-burning fireplaces and stoves, and September 15th was the deadline to register from Metro Vancouver. So, as I mentioned in a couple of media stories we did, you can imagine there's white vans rolling around at night looking for puffs of smoke from your chimney and pulling over, knocking at your door, and the fireplace police come out and Show me your papers, old man. What you probably don't know, and many people don't know, is that there are about 7 fireplace and stove manufacturers here in BC, many of them in Metro Vancouver, including Regency and Delta, and they are desperate. There are over 1,000 people working at them, and they are desperately seeking to build more, and also facing the problems of the Trump tariffs on steel and aluminum, which are part of the products they need. So, you know, we've got all sorts of things going on. We've got all sorts of economic challenges, and registering my fireplace is not on my top 10 list.
And yet.
Margareta, Bill raises a good point about the local domestic production of those fireplaces and equipment. We also manufacture a number of natural gas appliances that you would use to heat your home in British Columbia. There's another policy that we've been looking at closely as part of Energy Futures Institute, and it has to do with electric vehicle mandates. And I mention it in this context because it's a little, I think, unconsidered reaction or implication of the provincial policy that's still in force. You heard recently Prime Minister Carney suspended the federal EV mandates a couple weeks ago for at least 60 days of review. But the unintended consequence of those mandates is to force you to purchase vehicles not made in Canada. Because we don't manufacture a single passenger electric vehicle in Canada. Not one, not for your personal use. We do manufacture pickup trucks, cars, minivans, including hybrid vehicles, including North America's most popular hybrid vehicle, the RAV4. It's mass-produced in Cambridge, Ontario, and exported to the United States, something Donald Trump wants to stop, and he probably didn't expect that we would help him by creating a legislative framework and a $20,000 penalty per vehicle that doesn't comply with the EV mandates. And that $20,000 fine, created by the provincial government as well, in this kind of overlapping policy environment we live in Canada, would apply to the RAV4 hybrid built in Cambridge, Ontario, or the Honda Civic hybrid built in Elliston, Ontario, or the Honda Civic or Honda CR-V small SUV hybrid would also attract a $20,000 penalty potentially under the BC legislative scheme that doesn't come into effect next year, as some members of the media say. It applies to the 26 model year, and those 26 models are here now. And the provincial government officials enforcing it have instructed the car manufacturers it applies to the model year, not the calendar. So you are on the hook now. And it's, you know, an affordability crisis. Do you think many customers are going to want to see the $20,000 penalty passed on top of the already exorbitant price for new vehicles? So anyway, there's a made in Canada kind of a patriotic reason to reconsider that. Never mind that if we did all convert to electric vehicles, the modeling we had done by Professor Gesseroli at BCIT indicates we need another 2 more Site C dams worth of electricity for all the electric vehicles just in British Columbia by the year 2040, on top of any other demands for electricity. So it's about pace, and it's about thinking like, let's not shoot ourselves in the foot and give President Trump any more help in damaging the Canadian economy while we're at it. Because again, we are successful in manufacturing vehicles in Canada, and I do care about the Federation. I know I'm in British Columbia, but I still bleed red. I am a Canadian at heart, and so I do care that we have a viable auto sector in our country, and I don't think it's going to help our country if one province is imposing legislation that says, you know what, Canadian-made vehicles aren't good enough, you have to import them.
So, I mean, that's a common sense economic argument, right? We have a little bit of time left, not too much. So, Barry, I know you had some slides. I'm curious what the political case for all of this is. What are British Columbians saying? Maybe rapid fire, you want to take us through your findings of recent polling, and then we'll jump back into the panel for some wrap-up?
Well, there was a time when I was a politician. I'm still trying to recover from that, as I know former Premier Clark is. But I knew that there'd be some politicians here, and we were always interested in public opinion surveys. It's like giving a cat catnip. It's what we operate on. So let's take a look. We did at Energy Futures, we hired Ipsos to take a pulse, and I was told by Margareta I only had time for 2 slides, so I'll keep it brief. And I do thank the Ipsos here and Kyle Braid for doing this work for us. We asked the question, do you think you should have choice when it comes to home heating? You could use electric or natural gas. Would you like to have that choice, or do you think the government should restrict your choice and force you to use electricity only? And you can see, probably better than I can from where I'm sitting, what the slide shows, but a clear majority, almost 2/3, say they want choice. And so, you know, for Minister Dix, I'm hoping that this information is helpful for him to take back to his caucus to give him the latitude, because I agree with Bill. Minister Dix is no fool. I've known him a long time. We were on opposite sides of the legislature. I got to know him well. He can read numbers as well as I can. And so these numbers illustrate a political point, and I hope that it can be useful for him educating members of his caucus about where the political reality lies in British Columbia. And then on this other topic about electric vehicle mandates, the opposition to them isn't as strong as taking away choice for home heating, but there's still a clear majority of people opposed to the government telling you what kind of vehicle you have to buy. Because I didn't have permission to have a third slide, I don't show it here, but the biggest number we got in any of our polling was 76%. 76% agreed with the notion that regular hybrids, such as the ones built in Ontario, should count towards the EV mandates, but they don't. And when people hear that, they're quite surprised, because most people think, well, that's a good thing, isn't it? But it's not good enough. The purists have been in charge in setting the policy, and they're letting their zeal for the perfect get in the way of the very good. And you know, it takes time for people at a broad level to get used to technological change. 20 years ago, many people were nervous about regular hybrids. And it's taken about this long for people to, en masse, get over that reservation. And now we see, like I said, the Toyota RAV4 is now the best-selling vehicle in the United States. The Americans are embracing hybrids that happen to be built in Canada, at least for now, subject to government policy changes here, but and tariffs. But no, the point is, it takes time to bring people along. So the idea that we're going to restrict your choice and say that 26% of all vehicles sold starting today have to be electric in British Columbia, rising to 90% in 5 years, is just not realistic. But that's what the provincial legislation calls for. We're expecting an update from the province on this. They've been conducting over the summer what they call a review of the Clean BC suite of policies, and the electric vehicle mandates are part of that, and so is the effective ban on renewable and non-renewable natural gas. That's all subject to this Clean BC review, and we're anxiously awaiting the outcome. But I'm hoping information like this can provide Minister Dix and the government with some guidance about where the public is at on these issues.
Anxiously awaiting, you're eagerly anticipating, we'll see. But I think this is a suitable moment for closing comments on what this path forward that respects energy choice, that respects electrical grid realities might look like. Starting with Mayor Locke, what would you like to see the provincial government do on a policy level?
Well, I guess I want to talk about the affordability and the whole notion of job creation and how that all happens, because Christy Clark talked earlier about BC being open for business, really important. Surrey wants to be open for business. The challenge for us is we can't. We just had an Asian computer chip manufacturer say they can't come to Campbell Heights because they just don't have the power to get there. They don't have the energy that will be delivered. So I remember, and Barry won't because I got a much better memory than him, but when we were in caucus a very long time ago, pretty cool guy named Jim Pattison came and he said to us, capital is cowardly and it will never go where it isn't wanted. And right now, it doesn't feel very wanted. We in the city of Surrey are doing everything we can. We believe in facilitation, not regulation. We're doing everything we can to open our city to be open for business, to let people come in, because we are the only place in the entire Metro Vancouver that has the kind of industrial capacity to deliver for not only Surrey, but for the entire province. And yet, we can't seem to get there. That's a huge, massive challenge to cities that are trying to put their best foot forward. We're not the only one. So I would say that we have to really put our shoulder to this one. This is This is critical to all of us. It's critical to our the success of this province. It's critical to us with our infrastructure, for housing, for just about every darn thing you can think about. And I can tell you, we have about 4 greenfields in Surrey, and when we say we can't deliver housing, one alone is 1,300, I think it's 13,050 doors, something like that, 14,000 doors. When we have to say, oh no, we can't build those, that's 14,000 families that are not getting a house. We have to think about that in a whole, much more broader way, and really think about exactly, I agree with Bill, we need choice and we need it now. So, thank you.
So orient energy policy in BC towards unlocking opportunity, not blocking it. Over to you, Bill.
Yes, thank you. I agree with Mayor Locke, of course. Look, it's bad public policy, in my view, to have a crazy quilt of regulations where what you can do in Surrey, you can't do in Burnaby and New Westminster, but you can do it in another town, you can't do it in another. And I think the best thing the provincial government could do right now is just say, we're not doing zero carbon step code, early adoptions, forget about it. We're going to have one code, it's going to be across the board, and then they should look again at the zero carbon step code and say, does this make sense? Is 2030 possible? What can we do to encourage more investment in British Columbia and more export energy like natural gas and renewable natural gas? And on a positive note, and I guess, Barry, the good citizens or the good council of North Cowichan must have seen some of this polling before, because a few weeks ago they reversed the early adoption of zero carbon step code. They're the first council that I'm aware of that has reversed that. Vancouver tried it and failed, Richmond tried it and failed, but North Cowichan succeeded, so more power to them. Pardon the pun.
Barry has one sentence and then we're done.
Bill's a tough act to follow. Well said. I think all of us need to stay engaged in this. It's easy to get bogged down on other matters, but I think without reliable and affordable energy, we don't have an economy that's sustainable. And we heard the sobering presentation this morning from the BC Business Council on BC's rather troubling current fiscal state and the slowdown in job creation, which is impacting people. And at the foundation for any economic success, we need to have affordable and reliable energy. And once we get that, we keep working towards sustainability as well.
Thanks so much, guys. Thanks for listening. Over to Stuart.
Panel, please stay where you are. There's going to be a picture, and audience, at 3:10, we are going to resume. So we're going to take a 5-6 minute break here. I just want to quickly say